If you're 63 with around $2.5 million saved and you're wondering if you can safely spend $12,000 a month in retirement, this case study video is for you. We're going to walk through all the math, the pitfalls to look out for, and why simply having enough money doesn't solve all of your worries. But before we jump in, my name is Jacob Duke. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of a retirement planning firm that helps people just like you plan smarter and retire better. Now, at first glance, you might look at $2.5 million and say, Jacob, of course that is enough to retire, but the real questions are about more than just having enough. Can you survive a higher distribution rate before Social Security starts? And what happens if the market drops out by 30% in year one of retirement? Or how do you create income from a portfolio without increasing your health insurance premiums before 65? And don't forget about Roth conversions. Should you do them at all? And if so, how much should you be doing every single year? See, it's not only about just having enough for retirement, it's about managing all of the what ifs so that you can enjoy your hard-earned money as much as possible. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in to see Tim and Kathy's situation. So here we have Tim and Kathy, and right now Tim is 63, Kathy is 62. She'll soon be 63 as well. They have a liquid net worth of around $2.5 million. You can see that's made up of $35,000 in cash. For their 2.4 or so here, they've got $400,000 in a brokerage account. They've got 180 in her Roth. They've got 120 in his Roth. Now, it's important to understand how valuable those different account types are beyond their tax-deferred 401ks. Whenever you have what's called asset location, money in different account types, so the taxable account, it's taxed every year. The dividends and interest are taxed every single year, but it gives you flexibility in terms of when you take that money from the account and you actually control the tax rate a little bit. Whenever you sell something in the account at a long-term capital gain, you might be able to do that at a 0% long-term capital gain rate. I've done videos on this and talked about this at length. I'll have those linked down in the description below for you to watch after this one. But they also have these Roth IRAs, and a lot of people think, hey, Roth IRA, let that grow as much as you possibly can. Never touch it. Let it grow into the future. But what I would argue back is, like, if you have tax-free money, you've saved into Roth so that you can have tax-free income at some point here in retirement, why would you never use it, right? So yes, we understand that, having more money invested for a longer period of time in a Roth IRA helps more tax-free growth occur. But you have to ask yourself the question, why do I have a tax-free source of income in retirement if I'm never going to use the tax-free source of income? So having these different buckets of money, if you will, that are taxed differently gives you flexibility in terms of where you want to pull money from and when you pull it from those different places. But I want to make a quick note on that because they have tax diversification and it's going to be important for them as they move forward. They also have about $950 in Tim's 401k and Kathy has about $800 in hers. In terms of their goals, what are they trying to accomplish? Well, they want to retire immediately here in December of 25 or January of 26. So that's kind of their time horizon. Hey, pretty much immediately. And then for their monthly spending, they're saying they need $12,000 a month. Now, what I've got built in here is I've got $10,000 a month of retirement expenses, but that $12,000 gets added up to whenever they add in their healthcare insurance cost estimates. And so I've got $1,000 a month per person pre-65, post-65, obviously it goes down once you're on Part B, Part D, and then a Medigap plan, your premiums go down. And that assumes that you would not be qualifying for the ACA subsidies pre-65. That's why their premiums are $1,000 a month. Maybe that's high, maybe that's low. Obviously, it's different for everyone across the country, depending on your geographic area and your age and health situation. So there's so many different factors in it, but as a general average, around $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month is a decent place to kind of start. So that'll be until they get to 65. Now, once they get to 65, they maybe can increase their spending in other areas and actually enjoy that, $12,000 a year each on different things because they would have a lot lower premium cost on Medicare. And for now, I've got an extra car, maybe some annual gifting for the kids and extra vacations, just kind of as placeholders, as zeros for now to see if we can add those things in and by how much. Right now, they're still working, and Tim is making 180, Kathy's making 120. For their Social Security here at 67, Tim would actually get $3,200 at that point. It obviously could increase a little bit over time as he's now getting cost of living adjustments. And then Kathy as well would get $3,000 a month. So over $6,000 a month of Social Security benefits at 67, assuming that's whenever they end up taking them. So that's the lay of the land. That's their situation. The first thing I want to do, number one, is see, hey, based on these assumptions, is this viable? Is it a plan that could actually work? So let's check that out, and then we'll see what maybe options or different things they can change to improve it. So right away, we see that 87% is their chance of success, okay? So if you know anything about me or have watched any of my previous videos or content, you know that I am perfectly fine with 87% as a chance of success, and here's why. Whenever you think about having a 100% chance of success, it definitely makes you feel good to see that three-digit number, that 100% number. The problem is that often means we're not spending enough money, meaning you're not enjoying what you've worked so hard to save and to have for this period of life called retirement. So what I like to see is anywhere between 80 and 90%. That's a good range. It leaves a little bit of variability for you to operate within, and I don't think that there's any danger in doing so, because here's also just, again, a thought for this as you're evaluating your Monte Carlo simulations, whether it be with an advisor or you're doing it yourself, is whenever this is being projected, it assumes that there is no human input or change that's going to happen over time. There's no human decisions that are going to be altered over time. So for example, let's say that things go poorly in the first 2 or 3 years of Tim and Kathy's situation here in retirement. Guess what? We're probably going to alter course. We're going to make adjustments. We're going to make changes. We're going to iterate and meet the new demand of that situation, right? Which may mean, hey, we're going to cut spending, or we're not going to do the Roth conversion, or we're going to take Social Security a little bit earlier or later. The landscape is always changing, and so your decisions can as well. This assumes everything is static in terms of when you're deciding to take Social Security, what your investment portfolio will be, all of those things, right? Yes, it's being accounted for in part because it's running thousands of simulations, but there is part of it as a human element. You simply won't let yourself fail if you've got $2.5 million. You want to spend $10,000 or $12,000 a month. The problem is you probably don't need that much money, especially with no debt. So you're trying to find out, hey, is $12,000 a month from a luxury and a lifestyle standpoint doable? And if it says 87%, that's a really good starting spot. Now, a couple things that I want to point out here that might make this a little bit better. Going back to their different accounts that they have, they've got a brokerage account and a Roth IRA, and they're not yet 65. So if they're not working, assuming they retire here at the end of December, 2026 is their first year of no earned income. If we can find a way to not increase the premiums by qualifying for those Affordable Care Act subsidies in 2026 and part of 2027, as they're 63 and 64 before they get to 65, if we can do that, we can actually reduce how much they're paying on a monthly or annual basis for their health insurance premium. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to say, what if we were able to do that by using their either brokerage account, right? Any cash they might have, but then also could we use any Roth IRA money perhaps to keep their taxable income low? So I'm just assuming that we do that. Let's say we bump that down. Instead of $1,000 a month per person, what if we just paid, I don't know, $500 a month per person? So instead of $12,000 a year, that comes out to $6,000, and $6,000 for Kathy as well. I'm curious if that makes a monumental difference. It's really only 2 years, but it could help here. So I think it was 87%. So it bumped it up a percentage point. Right now, one of the questions there is, Jacob, how do you actually control your income and actually reduce how much taxable income you have, especially pre-65? Well, again, it comes back to having these different account types, such as a brokerage account or a Roth IRA, and having the option to pull from those accounts if you wanted to. If everything's in a tax-deferred 401k or a tax-deferred IRA, that is your only option. You have to pay taxes on that. It goes on your AGI number, and it accounts for your modified adjusted gross income for those subsidies and the considerations there. So if you can find a way to maybe take some money out of your IRA or your 401k up to a certain level, right, to meet that minimum or that threshold there so that you can qualify for the subsidies, and perhaps use a little bit of cash or maybe sell some different holdings in your brokerage account that don't have very much of a gain, so that the gain only is the part that's going on your tax return. And even if you're going to pay a 0% long-term capital gain rate on that, it still gets included in your modified adjusted gross income as you consider ACA subsidies, but you can get a really large chunk of your basis out of that brokerage account perhaps to fund your life. And then if that's still not enough to meet their annual need of $140,000+, maybe they can start pulling on those Roth IRAs. And now I know that's controversial. Should they actually live off Roth IRAs at all, early on in retirement? And again, it goes back to this question, like, what do you have it saved for? Like, what's the point of having tax-free income if you're never going to use it? Because the key is once they get past 65, yes, they can use it for different things, maybe a new car or, a one-off trip or something like that, so they don't go above a certain tax bracket. Absolutely. But if they're thinking about trying to save money on their premiums today, right now is a great time to be able to use that tax-free money and not increase the premium. So That's one way that they could actually lower their spending for a couple of years or lower how much their premiums are on healthcare, which does add a percentage point here as well. Now, if we wanted to look at this even further, I'm curious what happens if we increase their monthly spending by $1,000 a month, even above and beyond the premiums there. So what if we say, instead of $10,000 a month, what if we go to $11,000 a month? And check out this side over here. This is the proposed side. I want to look at that first. If we do that, we'll see that it drops down to 77%. Maybe that extra $1,000 is not viable, at least in perpetuity. Maybe they can spend a little bit more for a period of time, assuming that the markets are going well and their portfolio is growing and expanding. If you're in a contraction period or phase of retirement and your markets and your accounts are going backwards, I probably wouldn't increase their spending. So maybe they could do that. So you have this range of 88 to 77% between 10 and 11,000. Basically $1,000 range there of spending that you could look at. Now, I want to go back really quick and see what is their actual distribution rate on $10,000 a month really fast here. So we've got that there. I'm going to retirement details and then withdrawal rate. Okay, so it's not terrible. So it's 5%, a little over 5% there for the first few years until they get to Social Security age. Now, here's something I want to make a point about really quickly is, Jacob, how should our accounts be allocated? What should our portfolio look like as we're in retirement? Because the big question always is that sequence of return risk. Jacob, what happens if the market drops out 30% day one of retirement? We just gave up our jobs and our incomes, and now we're trying to live on the portfolio, but now the portfolio is worth 20 or 30% less than it was, hypothetically a day ago, right? What happens in that scenario? So this is assuming a baseline kind of return projection, anywhere from 6 to 7% annualized based on the portfolio they have right now. This is, again, based on historical numbers, so it doesn't mean this is what you would get in the future. It's just trying to run a projection here. But that'd be a 5% distribution rate early on before Social Security kicks in. You see it drop down there pretty quickly at 68. Now, if we say, what happens if we have a bad first 2 years of retirement? Okay. What's interesting is obviously that distribution rate to get the same amount of money out of the portfolio after a bad first 2 years, meaning the portfolio has dropped in value. The first year's distribution rate is over 6%. It goes up to almost 8% and then actually goes above 8% right before they get to Social Security age, and it drops back down to 5%. So what's interesting here is that, and this on the back half, just kind of ignore that. That's portfolio actually going down very quickly, so your RMD amounts and all your distributions you need from that are very high at that point. What's interesting here is that when you think about sequence of return risks, it always goes back to, well, how should we be investing our money? Okay. What I like to do here in terms of building out portfolios is I like to have a 5-year runway. Okay, now why 5 years? If you think back to 2008, it took from 2008 until about 2013, about 4.5-ish years, to actually get back to the same level in the stock market. Because the problem with the sequence of returns, if the market goes down drastically, is you don't want to have to sell something that's lost a bunch of value in order to create income for yourself in this new phase of life called retirement. So what you want to do is have something set aside on the sidelines. You want to have dry powder to pull on during that period of time. Now, if things keep going well and you keep making a lot of money on the stock side, great. We're going to be living off the interest, dividends, and the growth. We're going to be actually shaving the gains off the top of our growth and funding our life that way, rather than winding our cash position all the way down to zero and letting that keep growing. So what we would do there in that scenario is we will have a 5-year runway. What I want to do is have 2 years worth of living expense needs in cash. I want to have 3 years worth of living expense needs in fixed income, think treasuries, corporate bonds, things like that, maybe on the shorter term side of the duration range there. But really what you're doing is building out a 5-year runway. And I like to have these as a minimum. You can definitely have more than this up to a certain point. But what this does is you're kind of covering all your bases. If you've got 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years worth of cash and fixed income set aside, you have the ability, number one, to live off the interest from that. But then 2, you can actually start selling the principal if you have to. Now, you also have this stock bucket on the other side of the duration spectrum. And the stock side of things, that is designed to outpace inflation over time. So you want that to grow, and you don't have to tap into it during a hard period of time if markets have gone down. So what you've kind of done is you said, I've got my short term covered, I've got my long term covered, and kind of this middle ground with the fixed income bucket, that's covered as well. So that's how I like to build out portfolios, just from a fundamental standpoint in terms of like which buckets and how to invest. I don't like to start with a 50-50 portfolio or a 60-40 portfolio just from the get-go, because again, I want this to be tailored to your specific spending needs. If this were a different situation and they didn't need $12,000 a month and they only wanted $4,000 a month with $2.5 million, it's completely different. I'm going to be telling them to spend a lot more money, and they probably don't need as much money on the sidelines in cash and fixed income because their spending or expenditures wouldn't dictate having that much in those two different buckets. So again, I want to have your portfolio tailored to you and your specific needs, and that's why I like to use that 3-bucket system. Now, what I want to pay attention to here as well is, if they have this hard period of time, right? They have this where it's like we're down 20 or 30%, right? And now we've got this really high distribution rate. The good news is right now we're planning on taking Social Security at 67. Okay, so if we hit hard times and we're like, oh, I don't like to take that high of a percentage out of my portfolio, can I take my Social Security early? And the answer is absolutely yes. I like to hold my Social Security as long as possible until I need it. So they don't need Social Security, assuming everything is going well and according to plan. As soon as things are not going according to plan, they might need their Social Security a little bit sooner, and that's when they can pull it out of their back pocket and say, okay, I'm ready for my benefits now. But if they can continue to delay them, they're going to actually, increase their monthly income over time, which sustains their portfolio longer. So just as a way to show that out in terms of the sustainability portion of this, if we go here, we can look and see that right now it's at 67. If we go early as possible, it will probably bring down this percentage. I might be wrong, but we'll see. Yeah, it brings it down a little bit. But if we go all the way up to 70, it'll go up because it's more sustainable because they're going to have larger income for longer. Now, again, I'm not saying this is what they should or shouldn't do because everybody's situation is different. Everybody's preferences are different. But what this is also accounting for is the fact that Tim is passing away at 85 and Kathy is passing away at 95. So if we think about it differently, we just say, hey, what if she's at 85 as well? And what if he's at, 81? Does that change the decision point there of delaying to 70? So it doesn't make a difference. Here's why: because they passed away sooner, so their portfolio is that much, better in terms of how long they actually need the money. So you could say, well, maybe just take it earlier. The problem is you also have to look at, in this situation, it's not a big difference in terms of 3,200 versus 3,000 for their benefits at 67. But if you had a big wide discrepancy there, it still might make sense for Tim to take his at 70 or delay it so that Kathy would have a larger survivor benefit if Tim predeceases her. So there's so many ways to configure Social Security and your timing on that, and there's no right answer. The only way to have the right answer is to know exactly when you're going to die. Obviously, none of us know that, but really what I want to do is kind of stack the odds in your favor and say, I want you to take your Social Security when you need it, not when you want it. And there's just kind of this back and forth and decision point of how are markets going? How's our accounts performing? What are the balances doing? Are they going up? Are they going down? Do we feel good about our income plan still? Do we not need it still? Or do we want to take it because things are getting kind of hard? All that is up for discussion, and that's the hard part and the nuance about claiming Social Security. Yes, you can run math. Yes, you can run break-even points, but it's not as simple as you might seem sometimes, especially when you add your preferences and the human emotional component to it. Now, I want to pay attention as well to their tax situation. So they've obviously got over $1 million saved in tax-deferred accounts. Now, what happens if we do Roth conversions or not? So what I want to pay attention to is their current tax rate. So if we look at the effective tax rate, we can see that, first of all, they're spending down their brokerage account and their cash first, especially as they before they get to 65. But once they get to here, they have Social Security turn on at 67. And now also, too, the only source of income they have is going to be their tax-deferred 401ks. And then they're, in this, at least in the projection, they're not spending their Roths yet. So we can see that they have this increase, and they have a jump here at 75. That's whenever their RMDs would kick in, and then another jump here whenever Tim passes away. This is based on the proposed plan. I'm going to kick this back to the current plan just so we have a baseline to operate based on. And you can see there's a constant increase here. Jump at 75 because of RMDs, and then Tim passing away. That's the widow's tax wrap. I've talked about that before, but that's what you're looking at there. So really the opportunity is, what if we did some Roth conversions here in this lower period of time? Now, what I would say is they might not want to do those Roth conversions, especially if they're trying to get the subsidies pre-65. If they are, no matter what, not going to have the subsidies, might as well go ahead and do Roth conversions as well. Again, that's a nuance within the whole plan. But what if we did some Roth conversion projections here and see if they benefit at all? So I'm just going to move this back to there, and we're going to say, let's see, they start calendar year 2027, and then we're going to do them until Tim is 67. That's whenever he would be, actually let's do it till Tim is 70, right? So that'd be, I don't know, 5 years or so. And we're going to say, let's just fill up the 12% bracket. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so if we come here, we can see, I'm going to flip this back here. We can see that we're going to fill up that green shade there. That is the Roth conversion amount. Okay, so we're filling up the 12% bracket, and by doing so, you end up with a little bit more end-of-life tax-adjusted ending balance. So by this much, right, so that's not a small number at all. It's definitely beneficial to perhaps do Roth conversions. Again, lots of things to consider there. ACA premiums, do you do them before 65 or not? All the different questions. Right now, I'm saying don't do them before 65. I'm just saying start once you're actually off of the ACA subsidies, and you can actually see what the conversion amounts would look like. So just by converting, I don't know, $250,000-ish, you're going to benefit by having $400,000+ more dollars overall at the end of life after you account for growth on that tax-free money. That's a great thing for heirs if you do have kids or somebody want to leave money to. Now, if we look back at the summary of this, that's how much less in tax they're going to pay over time, and that's because they're going to have this much less to withdraw from their accounts due to a lower RMD amount because less money is in those tax-deferred 401ks. Now, if we keep going here, I want to see if we fill up the 22% bracket, which is a maybe or maybe not. It depends on your situation, but we can see in their situation anyway, if they convert up to the 22% and bypass that 12%, they're going to benefit that much more in terms of total taxes not being paid and this much not having to be pulled out of their tax-deferred 401ks. If you look at the calibration on this, you can see, so last time we stopped here at the green section. Now we're going up to that yellow line to fill that up until we get to 70. And so so that's actually, you know, in terms of like taxes saved, great. That's better. Here's the problem. When you look at the actual benefit of that after-tax assets at the end of life, they actually end up with less. I think this was 400 and something thousand after we fill up only the 12% bracket. So by converting more, you might save on taxes, but you could end up with a little bit less money at the end of life. That's the nuance that comes with Roth conversions. There's no right answer every single time. Even if the math says, yes, we can save on taxes, you've got to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish with the conversions? Are you trying to have tax-free money for yourself to use later in life? Or are you trying to have a tax-free inheritance for someone else that's after you? Because typically, the hard part with Roth conversions is you need some time for that to work out, especially if you're not going to pay the taxes out of a brokerage account or out of cash. If you're going to be withholding the taxes out of the IRA distribution itself upon the conversion, it takes a lot longer to climb out of that hole. Now, even if the math doesn't work in terms of like, you know, benefiting from that money over time, you still now have money in a Roth IRA that you can pull from for random expenses such as vacation or a new car or a roof repair or a home remodel. Those are all tax-free distributions because you now have that money in your Roth IRA. So the Roth conversion discussion is a really difficult one to actually say, yes, do this or don't do that. I land on, hey, if you can do a Roth conversion and do it thoughtfully up to a certain tax bracket, absolutely do it because no one's ever regretted having more money in Roth. The problem is you get really in a tough situation whenever you start saying, I need to convert everything to Roth, and I've done videos on that. So if you want to watch that video, it's going to be linked in the description below. That way you can watch it after this one. So in their situation, Tim and Kathy, they can spend the $12,000 a month. There's a lot of things obviously to keep evaluating here. There's a lot we haven't looked at or discovered, but hopefully this video gives you a little bit more perspective on what to be thinking about, how you can approach your situation, and see how these ideas and thoughts might apply to your retirement plan. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you in the next video.